All righty. 3 kids. What were the ages? I didn't ask.
Oh, 5, 7, and 9. 5, 7, 9.
5, 7, and 9?
Yeah.
That's odd. See what I did? See what I did? That's all right. That's okay. Bading. All righty. This young man likes anime and shonen. Oh, she agreed. One person.
Yeah.
Then he says he and his wife like to settle down to romance anime. I didn't know that was a thing. That's a thing. So you just sitting there watching cartoon people get married. That's what you're watching. Mm-hmm. That's all right, bro. You do your thing. He is a hockey fan. All right. Bruce. And he both played, right? And now you're getting your kids into it?
Yeah.
Cool. And he said, let me read this correctly. Chris should know better than to cheer for the Red Wings. They are the worst team in hockey. The city is average at best. The Pistons are the only thing worse than the Red Wings. I never liked the Lions either. The Tigers could have made the playoffs, but they stink. He wrote all that down. That was awful.
You might have embellished.
A lot of that did come from Todd. Yeah, it did. All right. He did say, and this is funny because you're a lot like me, he says he's a sugar monster, loves sugar. Not supposed to be eating sugar.
Nope.
It makes you feel unwell, doesn't it?
Yeah, it makes my heart go into AFib.
But you eat the sugar, don't you?
Oh, yeah. You got to live until you die.
This is why women outlive men. We don't make no sense, bro. Come on, bro. Lay off the sugar. That's me and dairy. I'm not supposed to eat dairy, but I do. The cool thing he said, and I appreciate this, he used to be afraid of public speaking, but then started doing some stuff, like here's a plug, not a real plug, but it's just in general, Toastmasters. If you have a Toastmasters group near you, good group, lets you get over your anxiety, your fear of public speaking, and it helped him get more and more comfortable to be able to do this. How many of these have you done?
About 10 conferences, about 100 talks in person.
Give him up for that. Yeah. Give it up. Ladies and gentlemen, please bang your hands together for hockey's finest, Will Klein.
That has to be the best intro I've ever gotten. Hello, everyone. Before I begin, I want to thank you all for being here right now, for sticking around to the end of the conference, and not for me, but actually for you. And let me explain really briefly. Kenneth gave us some really great encouragement to share online what's going on here, what this community is like, and attract more people to experience what you all have to offer. And I wanted to highlight two things I found to be true about all of you being here the last couple days. Magnolia Conf, for me, I found it to be a chill, welcoming place where I could be myself right away. And I can't tell you how much that means to me as somebody that did not always feel comfortable approaching a new group and making friends among strangers. That is so easy to do amongst all of you. I don't just think it's your Southern charm, but I think it's the community here that's amazing. And also, I go to conferences for inspiration, to recharge with new ideas. And of all the talks that we've had the last couple of days, I'm exhausted because I've watched every single one with such intent and such interest, and it's been so much to take in. On one hand, my brain is tired, but my heart is full. So I absolutely love this community, and I hope to be here many times more. Also, I have 6 people here that I've seen in the past and have caught up with, and I assume I will see all of you again someday in the future, but I might not be the best at remembering your face. So after this, if we haven't taken a selfie together, please ask me, and I'd love to take a picture with you. With that, I'd like to introduce a new talk that I've been working on. I've been thinking about this for a year or two. It's called DevTool Wars, Across the Browserverse. I'm a Marvel fan and a Spider-Man fan. I really love what Sony's done with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Beautiful animations, beautiful storytelling. I can't wait until they start work on the 3rd one. But today I will channel a slightly different Mr. S, Mr. Sherlock. And we'll do some investigations today and looking at our tools. Speaking of tools, I really love thinking about our tools like an axe. And in particular, this very old saying of Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. And I really believe this. I really think about this every time I go to work and work on things. I don't want to just repeat the same thing, go through the same motions, follow the same grooves again and again. I want to find ways to be just a little bit better, a little bit more efficient, and even more importantly, understand things just a little bit more. And I think our tools are something that we always have so much room to get better at. I have been spending hours looking at DevTools, and I've only scratched maybe 1% of what's in there. There is so much, and that's just the browser DevTools. There's our editors, there's our linters, and our builds, and our build tools, and our languages, and our frameworks. There's just so much, and any time that we can spend in that, I like to say, if we got 6 hours, just spend 6 minutes a day looking at something, looking at documentation, trying something new, opening up a new tool, and just playing around each day. That will compound every day, and I think that will increase your capability to develop as a developer very significantly over a very short period of time. And I have good news. I know we've been tuned into some amazing talks. I'm going to show some technical things, but it's not important that you remember any of the technical stuff. They're more or less to show you and give you an idea of what's in there. And the idea that I hope you'll come away with is actually very, very easy and succinct. So when I go to debug and use my DevTools, I have 3 goals in mind. And the first is kind of obvious. I want to solve a problem often. I want to debug an issue. I want to figure out how I want to build something, and I need to check how the system works. So I have a problem to solve. That's the first one that's very common. The second one, I want to increase my understanding of the systems in play. I want to understand how the application is making calls and how those calls lead to other calls, and when data comes back from the server, how that flows through my data management system and renders out to the browser. I really care about increasing the understanding of how things are functioning that I'm building every time I go in there. And the last thing is, I also want to learn something. This seems related to the first one, but this is more like learning about facts and learning about the tools themselves and learning about CSS features and JavaScript features and ways to debug them and ways to write them and ways to make them more performant. So these 3 things, I think, are all opportunities every time we go to work, every time we go to open up our tools. And I don't always do all 3. I usually try to get 2 of them done, and I'm usually very far along and better off as a developer if I can do that, and growing quite a bit. So what's the first step? This one, I don't know if you see this coming, but I would say install more browsers. Who can guess how many browser instances, not tabs or windows, but instances in terms of like distinct browser processes I have running that are per a browser release and browser vendor? Any guesses? 5, 3, 10? Who said 10? I'll give it to you. You're off by 1, which is a classic problem that we have. Let's see if I command tab. You can see right here, all but 2 of these processes, VS Code and Finder, are different browser instances. And I'll explain why I do this and how I do this. Now, I'm usually only running like 2 or 3. I always have 2 open. I usually have, if I'm doing work, 3 or 4. But let me show you just really quickly what each of these releases look like. It was actually surprisingly hard to find all the different release channels for all of the browsers. Let me come over here to these tabs, just show you what they look like. And I can share the links in the Discord later as well. But Chrome is a good example to start with, and they set a pattern that many others follow, where there's a stable release. This is what everybody downloads. This is what you get when you go to download the browser. And there's a few other releases, 3 other releases you can look at. Beta is like stuff that's coming out soon, and it should be stable, but it might have an issue. Canary is at its nightly releases. This is stuff they just built today. And I will say in the past 10 years or so, I've had a couple times where I'm debugging something, and there's something buggy. Like it's rendering wrong, or the dev tools aren't working right. So that can happen. I think the sweet spot, if you had to pick one, would be dev. Pull the dev channel. And if I go back here, I've got Firefox, I've got Edge dev, Chrome dev, and Safari, which I'll get to. Let's see. Edge follows the same pattern. Again, you can pull the dev channel. This one was really hard to find. You don't need to become a Microsoft insider to do this. But it's worth checking out. And Firefox is very straightforward. There's a developer edition. I actually don't know if there's anything really tuned or different in the DevTools, because I just use Developer Edition. That's the one browser. I probably never reach for the actual stable so-called release. I just use Firefox Developer Edition pretty much full time. And Safari is a little bit unique. They broke the trend. They have a beta, but they don't have like a nightly release. They do have a Safari technology preview, which brings me to the first reason why I like to have these installed and ready to go. I was seeing some updates from Safari lately getting talked about on their blog and some videos. And I went to the release notes, I looked at everything, and it was saying that they're released in Safari Technology Preview. So when there's an article comes out or something gets hyped and you hear about something, if you get curious, being able to pull it up in Safari Technology Preview, or as I was saying, the developer editions, you're very likely to get those features that are being talked about in whatever newsletter or conference talk that you might see. So I find that's a really good sweet spot and a really good thing to have. The other thing I really recommend is I try to keep my DevTools settings very stock in the stable releases. So if I'm working on a feature that's going out in a release tomorrow or we're shipping today, I'm going to go straight to stable. And I'm going to work on that, make sure I'm not having any issues, making sure that I'm seeing what our users are likely to see, and I'm not having any complications there. But then over when I'm using Safari Technology Preview or Firefox Developer Edition, I'll go nuts there, and of course the developer edition releases of Edge and Chrome, I'll go and enable experimental flags. And I'll be aggressive with like turning a bunch of things on to see what happens as I'm trying stuff. And I won't have to worry about resetting those flags in the stable channel because I've kept those very stock. So two good reasons to have multiple browsers installed is so you can check out the latest at a whim, on a whim at any time you hear about it. And the other is so you can mess around with feature flags and settings in a really safe way and not mess with your regular developer workflow when you need things to be really stable and locked down. All right. Where did I put my deck? I got this. Here we are. All right, with that, let's start exploring. I found this was, I was out getting analysis by paralysis because there's so many things that have happened even in the last year to check out. So I'm just going to look at some things that I've actually been playing with on a daily basis in the last month, or it's solving actual problems at work. So let me jump over. I'll start with Edge right now. So I'm going to pull up my website. This is willklein.co if you want to look at my socials and track me down or schedule a chat and just get on a call with me anytime, talk about this stuff. I'm up for it. I'm going to play around. I've been meaning to make this not just so black and white and blue with links. So I'm going to play around with something very simple. I'm going to inspect this. By the way, I'll do Command-Option-I on Mac to open this, or I'll right-click and inspect based on the elements so it can have focus on something I can start with. And from here, I'm going to show you, what do I want to show you? Let me hide this because I don't want that to be there just yet. So if I want to look at the styles and I want to play around with, let's say I want to play around with the color of this text because I don't want it to just be black. I can go to the computed and scroll down here. There's a filter on all of these. This is pretty consistent across the browsers. And there's always this little, it's really hard to see. I'll try to make it a little bit bigger. But there's this little arrow that appears when you hover over where you can go to the definition and see where it is, the most prevalent style in the cascading style sheet in the cascade. And here I can start playing with this color. And I get a color picker when I tap on that. This is very standard. There's nothing unique here about Firefox, nothing yet anyway. But I want to highlight a couple things that I find really nice that I've really been using and finding handy. And this is not unique to Firefox. The contrast ratio, making sure that we have good contrast so that things are accessible is really important. And by the way, I will say, even if you are, you have normal sight and you don't have any visual impairments, you might have a monitor impairment. And I actually like to have a monitor that's really kind of blown up in brightness and not having good contrast. It usually happens just on its own. And one monitor that's really true to color and dialed in like my Mac screen. Because when I look at people, I was on a call with my team last week, and I think our product manager could not see something or see like a background because it was so light in contrast. And that's a very real thing that happens with your users. So paying attention to contrast is a really great place to start with accessibility. And this tool makes it very easy to dive in and look at it. Now, if I expand this, we get two numbers here, and there's a AA and a AAA. If you can get AA, great. If you can do AAA, even better. But I would say please do AA at the very least across the board in all the text that matters on your websites and the experience. There's a couple things here. Let's see. These are both good, so I'm going to leave it at that. But let's say I want to play with colors. All right, I'm just going to pick a color. I know AI is trying to take purple from me, but I love purple. And I made it pretty purple. Let's see how light I can get it. I'll put it over here. I want to sort of break the contrast a little bit here. So here I've got a green check on the AA, but the AAA is saying it's failing. There's this really cool little button here that I can choose the selected color that'll bump it up just enough to hit contrast. And I actually didn't like how that's the one time at least on the screen I'm looking at. I don't love how it came out. It didn't keep the color. But usually that sort of gets me where I need to be. So these are some really handy tools, and if anything, something to look for. Another cool thing I see often in each of these tools is you can pull from a color palette, and I've seen this populate with other colors on my page. I actually don't know technically if it always does that. I think it is pretty clever about it. I've seen it pull in CSS variables on my company's website and the developer portal I work on. So I can play around with different colors in the palette. And when those are other colors on your page, you can quickly sort of play around with things that might already be in your design system tokens, already in your designs. All right, so enough of like just some orientation of looking at some DevTool stuff. Let's look at a different experience, slightly different experience. I'm going to jump over to Safari and do kind of the same thing. And one difference that I'd like to point out is they by default have, and I'll bump this up, I promise, they by default like to put up this third panel, which can appear in the other browsers. But by default, they put up the computed over here. So I don't have to, like, if I go back, I have to sort of like bounce around between styles and computed. And it might not be every browser. There's at least one of them I can get that into its own panel. But I like how it's by default in Safari. And I found this really handy because often, I don't know, sometimes the color is not right here at the top. It's somewhere buried down here. Further down in the scroll is simple styles, of course. But here I can just jump right down to the filter, or I can find it right there and go to it. Another thing I see coming up, and I can't remember if it was in the previous browser, but is I like when there's documentation right there in the tools that we're using. And color's super trivial, but there's so many things coming out in CSS that I don't even know how they work. And I'm often finding that if I can click on these things or hover on these things to get a description of what they are, or even click directly to go to the MDN reference of what these things are so I can learn more about them, super handy thing to be taking advantage of in your DevTools. And all of them, I think, have this to a degree. They all do it just a little bit differently. Like some of the browsers actually show the baseline, show browser support right here in line, and that can be really handy. I want to say Edge does that, but I could be wrong. Let me try some of the same stuff I did before. I'll pull up this color picker. This one came up a little different. I've actually tripped over this a couple times. Somebody probably knows in the audience. I assume several of you know some things that better than I do, of course. But I'm actually not getting the contrast here. And I have gotten it in Safari. It's really there. And this is just one of those things. The UX will be a little different from tool to tool to tool. And I don't think any one of them is any better than the other. They're just all a little bit different. And you can find certain things have certain strengths. And that's been my experience in my day-to-day. All right, let me jump over to something else that's kind of neat. So there's a font tab here, for example, in Safari. And it's showing me details about the font that's highlighted that's currently focused. That's nice. If I jump back to Edge, they did something, was it Edge? Or was it Firefox? It was Firefox. Let me do it over here, Firefox. So, by the way, if you enabled, I think I'd enable this, but you can directly inspect accessibility properties, which instead of pulling things up in Inspector, pulls up the accessibility tree right there. And I think that's pretty cool that you can jump right to that in a right click. But let me jump back over here. And something I found, let me make this bigger, is, let me make sure I focus this correctly, is there's the fonts tab here. There's all the other stuff we looked at before. And it looks just a little bit different. But the fonts tab has some unique controls where I can play around. I haven't seen this in the other browsers, where I can sort of play around with the size here. And that's pretty neat that they have these controls here. And there's little things like this sprinkled throughout all the different tools, you know, the network tab and performance and memory, where things are just a little bit different. There's just a little bit more capability to go in and tinker. And so one idea of how to explore these, by the way, is if you're really looking at something, pull it up in one other browser and just see what it looks like. And it might be the same, it might be different. In this case, it's pretty different. You can do some different things here. Unfortunately, I can't choose, like I want to play around with different fonts. I think I only have Verdana. Maybe if I try this with a page that has different browsers, I might get a drop-down. But I like that I can at least play around with these things right now. That's super handy. So just super quick example, just playing around with some fonts, playing around with some colors, looking at accessibility on some text. I've already found a bunch of different things. Next, I want to talk about Firefox Profiler, because this one was a little bit unique in how you can look at recordings and things like that. So I jumped over to performance here, and you can do this in all the browsers, and they all record in, I think, compatible formats where you can load them in different profiler tools. But I'll start a recording, I'll just do a quick refresh, and then I'll capture it. And then it, by default, just open it up, and don't worry about the exact details of what's on the page. In particular, it opened it up to profiler.firefox.com, which I found kind of interesting. I tripped over a video on YouTube when I learned about this, where the Firefox team was talking about how they wanted to share their profiles more easily. So they built a dedicated website, and you can actually load up, I think, traces from other browsers. I haven't tried that. Actually, I did try that. We can even try it right now. But you can load from a file or a URL, and I actually have a managed recording here of something I did before, which is exactly what I just did. I'll show you real quick here. I can upload this profile. If I want to, say, share it with a colleague, maybe I did this with a client on a screen share, and we're really trying to figure out what's going on with their page load being broken. It's something super specific to how they've configured their settings, their data model, when you do things like that. Some people know what I'm talking about. And I did upload, and it gave me a permalink here. I can copy this, and I can just jump over to Safari and load it in there, and load up this app and look at this thing, and I can send this URL to a colleague that knows how to really look at these things better than I do. I think that's pretty neat. I think they've done a really good job with that. And so they've built this into its own little web app that keeps your data private until you want to make it shareable in a pseudo-private way. All right, let's see what else I got. Let me refer to my slides, and then I'll see where I'm at. Let me touch on this. So why I wanted to share that there is a common denominator in 3 of the browsers. Chrome, Edge, and Firefox are all Chromium-based now, and they do have the same underlying browser tech and DevTool tech at the end of the day, but they are extended in unique ways. And I found Patrick Brissett at Microsoft Edge Developer Experience team, used to be Firefox Dev team, DevTools team, by the way. He shared this on a video, and he said, for a lot of the things we do, we agree with the other browser dev tools out there. But in some areas, we have our own opinions about how dev tools should be helpful to you. Imagine that, developers having unique opinions. I think there's, however many people in the room, we have that many opinions. And I think this is a great thing, by the way. I don't think this is browser wars, actually. That's a bit of a giant misnomer. This is really, I think at the end of the day, collaboration is what ends up happening. And all these different features that different teams try out, the other teams end up adopting and making their own, or emulating, or just doing it the same way. And I think that's a great thing. I think we see it with front-end frameworks, and I think it's also true with our dev tools. And I noticed that some people have formerly been on one team or on another team, so there's a really great little niche industry around dev tools. There's some awesome people like Patrick Brissett and Jen Simmons doing some amazing stuff across all the different teams. Okay, so I talked about colors. I talked about docs just a little bit, how you can link out to docs. I showed the fonts tab. Oh, I have a tab order that I wanted to show, which I think is also a really just useful tool. I think I had it in Firefox. Yeah, I actually forget how I enabled this, and I forget which browsers you can enable on. But I have these numbered. This is my tab order, 1 through whatever. This can be handy, and if you load this up on a more complicated website, maybe with navigation, it can sometimes be really helpful to see without having to manually tab through what's going to happen. And I thought this was kind of neat. I also found that if I inspect, I'm going to inspect this word back here, just for fun, because really, I don't know why this is fun. This is where I nerd. I nerd on DevTools, not just browser stuff, but just in general. If I go back to the accessibility tools, so this one was actually okay. I've seen it where there's actually 2 values here. Let me try to get this one. This one might do it. Let's see. I did that. And the course, I'm demoing, I can't get it. But I've seen it show multiple colors here. And I had it happen, I'm not sure it should happen with these little highlights. Oh, maybe because it's monochrome right now, that's why. Yeah, that's why. But if there's multiple background colors, which can happen with text, it can give you multiple values and tell you which ones are wrong, which can also be super handy. So it's hard for me to create that demo for it, but that's also really cool when you can see multiple values. And it's like you can see the white and black here, and sometimes you'll see like black and some other color to see that distinction of which one you're looking at accessibility value for. So just so many details. This is absolutely filled with so many rabbit holes that you can go into, and I really, really enjoy that. Back to my slides. So that's tab order. I talked a little bit about vendor needs. Let me say just a little bit more. Each browser comes from a different vendor, and they all have unique motivations and things they're doing, right? So like Apple, they have a whole ecosystem of devices of iPhones and tablets. So cross-device debugging for using Safari to see how things render on an iPhone or iOS is really baked into Safari. I think I heard, the Firefox team talked about being able to collaborate and being very collaborative. I've also heard somebody suggest that for a while they're really leading on implementing browser layouts and definitely did a lot of great education around grid layouts. So their grid layout tools were ahead of other browser vendors for a time. And what would I say? Edge, I heard them talk about how they have lots of really rich applications that are desktop apps, like VS Code, built on top of Electron. So that whole desktop experience is unique to them. So these different things will uniquely influence what other people at the company need and what might be just asked amongst coworkers. And I think that's good, because we're all building different things, and I think that variety, I hope it remains. Like I was a little bit sad when Firefox moved to Chromium, and there's just a little bit less diversity in the ecosystem, but I'm actually finding Firefox developer tools are actually quite distinct, and at least in the DevTool space, that's still very strong. I showed you a little bit about performance profiling, but I'm running out of gas. I won't go into layers visualization. There really is so many things, and I'm actually thinking about doing some videos and some blog posts comparing like a whole slice of tools, like let's debug layers, let's debug performance, and let's just look at it a little bit, example by example, which like each of those give you its own talk. This is more of a smorgasbord and quick sampler. So if that's interesting you, send me a message and let me know what you would be interested in hearing about, and that would really drive a lot for me. And I hope, I have a bit of a thing I'd like to share with you that really I hope you take away from this, and that is that I don't want any one single browser to be the only thing we use or rely on. And I don't think relying on AI and MCP servers is going to be much better or sufficient at debugging our issues or what they've written that doesn't quite work all the time. We're always going to need to open up our DevTools and inspect how things are working or not working. And perhaps more interestingly, I really care about this, understanding how things work, understanding how things play together, understanding the technology in play. The more you look at this stuff, the more you debug it, that's when you really get to tinker and try things and say, oh wait, that's how this paints. That's how when I make this change, things lay out differently. And I think that's really exciting. So let's continue to level up and become better developers with sharper tools, and most importantly, build better, more performant, secure, and accessible experiences for the web, not just ourselves, but all the people out there that don't have the skills that we do. And with that, here's how you can reach out to me. My website has all my socials, willklein.co. You can just email me, will@willklein.co. You've all been amazing. Thank you for welcoming me here. Thank you so much.